Hey everybody, and welcome back to another breakdown video. I hope you're all doing well. Today we'll be going over the USDCAD from Friday's New York. My first winning position of the year, so quite a good one to go over, I think. Same as usual, so we'll go situation by situation. We'll have a look at the mitigation, the POI, the entry, and just my overall thought process, really. So what we'll do is let's go down to the 1 minute and have a look at the open of the session. Let's get rid of all of that for now. So in terms of this New York session, essentially what we had is we had a big impulsive move. Now, we essentially just had no mitigation on any of these legs. So of course what we had is that we had our previous high for situation one. We then created obviously this break of structure in this session, which we then had that 1 minute IM there. However, what did we do? We went on create that 2 minute, not 2 minute, that second break for that successful retrace. So essentially we just have no mitigation. So let's move up to the 2 minute. I'm not going to go too in depth with the structure on this one because I think it's pretty simple in terms of following the breaks of structure. Exactly the same thing on the 2 minute. So we had our 2 minute IM. What did we have? We had our OB down below. What did we do? We created that successful retrace without that mitigation. So again, we move up. 3 minute, again, very similar. We had our situation 3 break. We then had our situation 1 break. We had obviously had our IM, but what did we do? We went and created our successful retrace again without any mitigation. So then move up to the 4 minute. Okay, so on the 4 minute, what do we have? Again, very similar. Situation 3, first IM, second IM, no mitigation. Okay, move up to the 5 minute, and then on the 5 minute, essentially, we just have no range in play, do we? Because we have this situation 3 break. Okay, we then don't get a body break to pull back, so this isn't a break of structure. And then again, we don't get that body break to pull back, so no break of structure. So in this situation here, while we've moved up through the time frames, there's actually nothing we can really do on the 5 minute yet on a situation 1 perspective. So moving back down to the 4 minute now, let's do this in a bit of a different way today, and we'll think about my thought process as opposed to being like a robot and saying situation 1 I am blah blah blah. So in this situation here, my alert went off for the low. Okay, so I alerted the high and alerted the low for the 5 minute as well. So at this point here, basically all I'm seeing is this. So we have our 4 minute first bearish IM to the downside. Okay, in this situation, where's our IM? So we have our last body break to the upside here. So we use the high of that range and the low of that range. Okay, what we can then do obviously is simply refine it to that imbalance. Okay, so now let's continue to play. Now, as my alert went off at this point here, obviously, because we're quite close in terms of, this a single candle to then pull back to the upside, my understanding then is, okay, so let me go to the 3 minute and see if we actually create a pullback. And what we then see is, not yet, I think it's this one. Yep, so on the 3 minute at this point, we create that successful retrace. Whereas on the 4 minute, while we're reacting to where we expect it to react to, we don't have that pullback, right? So we can't obviously mark our low, can we? Because there's no body break to the upside. So back again down to 3 minute, and now essentially what we see is something very similar. However, our mitigation is slightly more precise because we can refine it to the imbalance. Our high is going to stay exactly the same for that range. Okay, so we refine that to the imbalance. Okay, we're reacting off the open of the imbalance, and we create that successful retrace, right? So we're basically using the 4 minute bearish intent, but because we haven't created a successful retrace, we're moving back down the time frame to make the rules fit, right? So now the rules fit because we have our break, we have our IM range, and then we have our successful retrace. Okay, so at this point it's simply a matter of, okay, so let's just see now what actually happens and wait. And this one. Okay, so at this point here, what do? We then create that second rule, and that IM, mitigation, and successful retrace has completed. So our transition has now completed, okay? So now what do we need to do? We need to have a look at our mitigation. Is our mitigation at a high probability, or do we need to do anything with it, okay? So what's happened, okay? We had our IM range. We've refined the IM range down to where the imbalance sits, and we've hit the open of that range, and then we've had a nice move back down to the downside. Okay, so are we at a high probability mitigation? Yes, we are, because we're between the open and the 50% of that range. That range is fresh, so we don't need to do anything about it, right? Imbalance equals fresh, simple as that. Okay, so at this point here, we can get rid of this, and we can obviously draw our mitigation points to the left. Okay, so the mitigation's all good, our two rules are all good, okay, and we're happy with this. Now, in terms of the POI itself, obviously our IM candle again is, so this is the body break to the upside, we use the high of that range and then the low of that range. Now, is that clear at all? No, it's not. It's very ugly. So in terms of this, what do we need to do? We need to refine it, okay? We can't refine it anywhere to any sort of imbalance because there simply isn't any, okay? So we need to refine, right? So typically for me, I'll go straight down to the 1 minute. In terms of this, we need to obviously remember what our OB rules are. So it has to cause a break of structure. So we have our high, low, break, and our break here. So in terms of the 1 minute here, it's this candle. Why couldn't we use that? Number one, there's no imbalance, and number two, the low of that candle is outside our base range. Okay, down to 30-second. Okay, again, make yourself aware of your 30-second range to make sure that the candle that you're refining to, defines itself as an OB. Okay, so we had this break of structure here, we had this low, break, retrace, break. So we've got this low and this high, so we're in this massive range. That low then breaks at this point here, and where does that break from? That breaks from here, right? So there's your 30-second OB. Now, I had to check myself then. So what do we need to do? We need to check the size, and that's a 3.4 pip range, so that's simply far, far too big. So what do we need to do? Find a clearer, smaller reaction point, okay? Down to the 15-second, exactly the same thing again. However, slightly different range. This time we break to the upside. We then have a successful retrace, break at this point, have our high here and our low here. Where does that break from? Again, we have this range. There's the whole OB. What can we do to that OB? We can refine it to the imbalance. How big is that range? Again, it's too big. Okay, it's 3 pips. Now, what's my rule? 2 pips and below. Okay, 2 pips is the max. So what do we need to do again? We need to move down to the 5-second to again find a more specific reaction point. So again, let's find our ranges. So we have our obvious high up here, which broke from here. Where's our OB? It's this one. Okay, that's already been touched, so we have no imbalance, so we can't use that. That's not valid. Where's our next break? Our next break of structure comes from here. Is there a clear OB there that hasn't been touched with imbalance? No, there's not. Where's the next break? There. We can't use this because it's already been reacted to. So then we create this high and this low. Where does that low break? That low breaks here. What causes that break? This does here. So what can we do? We can mark out this. Okay, what's the next thing we need to do? Make sure that that's within our POI range, and it's about 1.4 pips. So it's below that 2 pip max, and it's simply the only POI that we can refine to. So in this circumstance here, we're only going to have one reaction point. Okay, so if we think about it realistically, the less reaction points you have, the less POIs you have, and the more specific the reaction point you're looking for, the higher probability that that reaction is going to give you. And I think a few of you get a bit confused by this. So if we have a reaction point that looks like this, for example, so say this is like a 4 pip reaction point, right, on a 15-second OB, what we need to understand is that on the 5-second, price is erratic, isn't it? It doesn't move like it moves like this, yeah. So if we think about it like this, right, so let's just follow these lines. I know it's a bit ugly, but okay, so we'd have had a loss here, right? We'd have had a loss. Oh no, that I didn't draw that very well, to be fair. I meant to draw it more like this. Okay, so we'd have had a loss there, and then we'd have had a loss here. So at this point, you're -2, and you start to get emotional. You start to think, oh my God, should I take the next one if it breaks again? And then we get this next break, and then let's say, for example, here you have your IM, and then what ends up happening is price reacts from there and then goes. So essentially, all you're doing with your refinement is you're gaining a more specific reaction point. Now, what if this was on the 30-second, for example, and then you go down to the 5-second and you see this? You see a refinement of that's much smaller. All you're doing with that refinement is you're taking all of this noise away and you're looking for that specific reaction. Okay, so when I talk about specific reaction points, that's all I mean. You're trying to take any noise away possible and just look for that reaction point that you're actually getting. So if we use this live example here, say we had the bigger 30-second, right, like this, for example, what we can see here is how erratic price is on the 5-second. As we come back up, we might get something like this. Yeah, so again, what would happen? We take this L. Yeah, we take this L, and then we end up getting this more specific reaction point, which then ends up being the winner right? And where's that coming off? That's coming off our refinement, okay? So that's all I mean about reaction points. Now, in terms of refinement, now a lot of the time, you know, you are going to have a 30-second, a 15-second, and a 5-second available. That's simply going to come down to personal preference, okay? There's no way for me to inject your brain with exactly how I see it. It comes from intuition, it comes from chart time, you know, those 10,000 hours is what's going to tell you, okay, so my base time frame has this, this, and this. It's clean. I'm going to use a 30-second because, you know, I'm happy with how it looks. Okay, in this scenario, okay, I can only use a 5-second, happy days, because then that increases my probability anyway, because I only have one single place for a price to react to, which doesn't only mean, you know, generally speaking, the 5 seconds is going to be smaller, but it means on that trade, you know, you're only risking a max of 2R. Whereas if you have 4 POIs and you're risking a potential of 2% per one, you know, that's 8%. Yeah, that you're risking on one trade. That's ridiculous for me. I wouldn't do that. Very rarely I'll use 3 POIs, but only if you know, all those 3 POIs are very, very small and specific. I don't want too many reaction points. Otherwise, you know, you can end up getting trapped in, you know, -1, -1, -1, and then missing the winner, and you just, you know, you start spiraling. So let's get rid of all of that. Cool. So let's go back to the base time frame and have a look again. So at this point here, we have refined all the way down to there. So what do we need to do? We need to set an alert and wait. So then let's continue to watch. Okay, so price does that funny thing where it actually instantly comes back up, so the alert goes off very, very quickly. So what do we need to do? We need to watch our ranges from here. So initially we came in and we had our low at this point here. We then create a new breaker structure because we have this small body break here. This body closes below this candle. So now what we have is we have this high and this low. Continue to play. Okay, and this point here, what do we get? We get that bearish intent. Now, obviously at this point here, you know, as per the PDF, you need to be aware of where your 15-second range is. Now, in this scenario, our 15-second range is irrelevant simply because we have our previous high and then we create our 15-second range all the way down here, okay? So we don't need to worry about the 15-second range. The only range we need to worry about for our entry is the 5-second, okay? This is one of those funny ones where basically a manual execution is going to be better than the limit order simply because once we break here, where's our range high? Our range high is there. Where's our overall OB range? Well, we've got this wick low, okay, from this body break here and then this high. So technically price can react anywhere between there. So what we can see is price, you know, mess about a tiny bit and then just go. Which is why in this scenario, you'll always see me use a manual execution over a limit order, simply because a limit order just doesn't make sense. We're almost already within that range anyway, especially when you then get your next candle, you know, come back up further into that range. You're always better just using a limit order, manual execution rather than limit, sorry. In terms of how you decide if you're going to use a limit order or manual execution, well, the only time that you'd have to use a limit is if your stop loss didn't cover your range high, right? So in this scenario, what do we have? We have a clear range high and our stop loss can go above that at our maximum of 2 pips, okay? So there's no reason why we shouldn't just get in this trade now and then continue to follow exactly the same rules, you know, wait for the next break of structure to go break even. My exact entry was, let me just check. MetaTrader 5, 1.34154. So obviously the only thing with manual execution is you're never going to know exactly where price is gonna actually go from. So you just need to be aware that you do need to cover your high. Now, what you don't want to do is enter something like this, right? Because I've seen a few of you do this, and this just makes no sense to me because you need to give it a little bit of room above because price can react anywhere between that range. Okay, so what you don't want to do is, you know, have a high reaction point like this, get stopped out, and then price end up going your way anyway. So always make sure you do give it a little bit of room above, just so you know you can have that deeper retracement for that IMOB. But yeah, that's the reason why I use the manual rather than the limit, simply because it just makes a lot more sense here because we're already within that range itself. So what do we need to do next? We don't need to worry about where our partial point is going to be yet. Don't need to worry about that. The only thing we need to worry about now is where we're going break even. So at this point here, what do? We create a new low. So we know if we body break that point there, that's where we're going to go break even and continue to play. Okay, so what do we do there? We get that body break. Okay, so we go break even. So this trade is now a risk-free as such trade. Now what we need to do is we need to zoom out and have a look where our partial point is going to be. Just make that a bit bigger. So let's find that 1 to 10. Okay, so there's our 1 to 10. Make sure, if you're not actively sat on, make sure your alert is above, so then you can come on, when it's hovering about 8R, because you don't want to actually do what I did and end up taking a little bit less. So let's continue to play. So we hit that 1 to 10. I got on a little, a couple minutes after, because I was doing something. I wasn't actively, sat at the screen at this point. So I ended up taking about I think it was just over 9. Where was my exit? Exit was there. Okay, so it's just over 9R. It was 9.1, so 72. So yeah, a pretty simple 1 to 10. Obviously, I went into a little bit detail there about the POI. I hope that didn't confuse anyone. It's just sort of me just releasing my thought process in words. Now, in terms of complexities with this trade, so there is only one really. So in terms of the 3 minute and the 4 minute and the 5 minute, what we've done at the start is we've explained why I follow which time frame and how. So essentially we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minute, 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes, sorry, range to the upside. Now, the only complexity here is going to be is that obviously we have this 4 minute IM here, right? So we have this 4 minute IM OB at this point here. Okay, we then obviously create that successful retrace. We know it's successful retrace because we get the body break without that mitigation. Okay, so in terms of this bullish price action, we're not going to be interested unless we break to the downside and then create a new range as we did. Okay, as explained, we then didn't quite create a 4 minute successful retrace to the downside simply because we don't have that body break, which is then why we move to the 3 minute, because we do create that rule. Is you have a 4 minute bullish IMOB here. So why would you take this trade at this point here? Now, you could say technically it was slightly riskier, but essentially my thought process was, okay, so our most recent 4 minute range is to the downside. We have a bearish intent, okay? We then have the 3 minute order flow to the downside. We have a high probability mitigation point, and we have a high probability POI point, simply because we only have one potential reaction point that can happen, okay? If there was 2, 3, 4 potential POIs all within this range, then I probably wouldn't have looked at it, to be honest with you, just because it gets a little bit more lower probability, because then we don't know exactly where price is going to react from. Whereas in this situation, as explained, because we only had one potential place for price to react to, that reaction, I don't know why it does this. That reaction on that 5 second fills me with more confidence, because it was the only place that price could actually react from. Why is our POI like that? Did I leave the POI like bigger? It should have been like this. My bad, guys. It should have been like that. It was obviously the 5 second that we used because that was the only one that was within the range. I think I made it bigger when I was explaining the why we make it smaller. Yeah, but that was the POI. That's my bad. So that was our reaction point. So ignore my bit about when we came into the range here, because we haven't quite hit it yet. I forgot to move it back over there. But I hope that all makes sense. I think I've explained everything. I think it was a pretty simple 1 to 10, and obviously I took that 9R. Why did I close all of it? It's just the first trade of the year, and I'm not too bothered about hitting some crazy RR. I just wanted to get that banked in, and then obviously move forward from there. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope we have a good week next week, and I will speak to you all in the Discord.